Well, it is that time of the year when people head for the hills in droves, but many hikers fail to do some basic safety tasks before they hit the trail. Things like pack a good map or let people know where you're going and when you'll be back. Steve Chapman is a cartographer and a Coquitlam search and rescue volunteer. He has created an app called Overdue, and he hopes that it will save lives in the backcountry. And Steve has been good enough to join us now in studio for more. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jason. Thank you for having us in.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us. So take us through this. How exactly does the app work?
So what it concentrates on, in search and rescue and prevention, we always talk about the 3 T's. So that's trip planning, taking the essentials, and training. So what the app does primarily is focus on the trip planning aspect. It's really super important to tell someone where you're going if you're going out into the backcountry, because if you get lost, injured, or whatever might happen to you, if no one knows where you're going, then no one's going to come and look for you, and no one's going to find you. So what the app does, it expands on the old form of trip plan, which was traditionally a big paper form that you might give to your wife or parents or something like that, and it brings it into the 21st century.
Why did you want to create something like this?
One of my roles with Coquitlam Search and Rescue is now to be in charge of the community education, and it's all about SAR prevention. And a prevention is way better than cure. So this now has the potential for not only making it safer for people when they're going out, but it helps search and rescue teams find the subjects if they go missing, because the app will give all the information, where they are, who they're with, what they're carrying. So it's a great start. It also has a tracking feature, so as long as there's some kind of cell phone reception at some point, then the last known point of that person can be picked up, so it makes it easier to find them.
That's very interesting, because obviously out in the backcountry, oftentimes there is no reception. You can't make a phone call, obviously. So how does this app work, given that aspect?
So the basic premise is it's the last safety net. So it tells people where you've gone, but also there's other features, as I said, the tracking feature. So if there isn't cell phone coverage, then it won't track you.
Right.
But if you get that brief instance where you have coverage, then it'll broadcast your breadcrumbs, as we call it, up till that point. So it gives search and rescue a good starting point on where to look. And you may have been totally incompetent in your route planning and actually gone in the wrong direction, so those breadcrumbs would show that aspect of it as well.
Right. There is a bit of an irony here, isn't there? For so many people, choosing to go for a long hike in the backcountry is exactly for the reason of unplugging for a bit and getting off the grid.
Absolutely, yes. I'm a great believer that technology should work hand in hand with the old tools. So if you're going to take something and leave something behind, always take that paper map and compass, because that will never fail. If you've got the skills to use them, then it's there for good. A phone, we find in search and rescue, quite often can lead people into trouble. So someone might have an app that has mapping incorporated in it. They're using that exclusively for their route, and then what happens is the batteries die, the phone gets wet. Worst case scenario, you could be injured yourself and not be able to use the phone and call for help.
Are you concerned at all then? Folks may be over-reliant on this app. If they realize they can do all of those things, then perhaps they may not take the time to learn how to actually read a map?
There is a mapping aspect in there. There's also a lot of other apps that do that, but the primary focus of the app is to actually have that safety net, so search and rescue know where to go looking beforehand. So you file your trip plan, and you needn't even take your phone with you, and that trip plan is filed, and then if you don't check in, you don't turn back home when you said you're going to be, then your emergency contacts will be notified, and then they will have that trip plan, and then they can send that trip plan to the RCMP search and rescue teams to come and look for you.
You work as a search and rescue volunteer in Coquitlam.
That's right.
What do you see as the biggest mistakes people making when they're heading out top of the mountain?
Yeah, there's a big list. I mean, every incident, every search has its mitigating circumstances. Usually, if there's a rescue, it's a series of mistakes that leads to that point. One of the biggest ones is not having some kind of light source, so a headlamp or a flashlight. An underestimation of how long a hike is going to take will invariably lead you hiking in the dark, and that's super difficult without any light, and then you lose the trail, get off trail, and worst case is you can end up in some pretty dangerous terrain.
Mm-hmm. What have you heard? I'm curious from colleagues within the search and rescue volunteer camp just about this app and allowing people to have an option like that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of positive feedback. We're currently in the testing phase, so a number of my search and rescue colleagues are testing and giving feedback on the app. It's all been very positive so far.
As I mentioned, the app is called Overdue.
That's correct, yes.
What are the next steps for it? If people are curious about it, what do they need to know about it?
Yeah, so it'll be on the App Store in a few weeks. So our plan is to finish the beta testing this week, and then next week we'll be putting it onto the stores. And there's, for people who don't know the software process, then there's a approval process that you have to go through Google and Apple before it actually gets posted. So we're anticipating that it'll be available for first download in probably a couple of weeks or so.
Okay, and what's the cost for it?
The cost is $2.99 per month.
Per month, okay. And so it's almost subscription-based in that way?
It's subscription-based, yes. And, we want to do it monthly, so, people can maybe just subscribe for a few months when they're particularly busy, and then they can opt out and, do it that way. And there's also a free period for people to try it out first.
Steve, thank you so much for making the time to join us in studio this afternoon.
And thank you for having me in again.
That is Steve Chapman, who is a cartographer and a Coquitlam search and rescue volunteer. He is one of the creators behind Overdue, a wilderness safety app.